Welcome to lesson number 5 in our study of Deuteronomy, plus the introduction lesson. So this is actually the 6th time that we've shared in this way, and I'm glad that you're here. It happens to be today, as I record this, the 11th of November, which means it's Veterans Day, 11/11. So thank you for all those who have served in the military, our armed forces, for your service. We thank you and appreciate you very much. And there is some of that symmetry, isn't it, to the day, 11/11. Well, today we go to a place in the Bible that has a kind of a symmetry to it. This is the 5th chapter of Deuteronomy, the 5th book of the Bible. And so you have the 5th book and the 5th chapter. A few years ago, Sunday, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, fell in a way that I decided I'd preach on the 5th chapter of the 5th book of the Bible because it was 5/5. So there is some symmetry that we have here. And the 5th chapter of Deuteronomy, in large degree a review, is Moses reminding the people of the 10 commandments that were given to them. And so on the top of your listening guide, which I hope that you have downloaded or acquired from the church office, you're going to find a question. It's good to know where to look for stuff in the Bible. So I asked the question of the 10 commandments are also found where in the Bible? And that answer is Exodus chapter 20. And the telling of the 10 commandments is virtually the same between the two. Sometimes some scriptures have some little nuances of differences, but here it's pretty much the same, and not worth digging into what one says in Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy chapter 5. If you want to sound smart, then you know this next blank. The scholarly name for the 10 commandments is the Decalogue. Deca is the root form for 10, like a decade is 10 years. And logos, John's gospel begins in the Greek, in the beginning was the logos, which means the word. And so this literally means the 10 words. And 10 wise words indeed they are. It's kind of like so many laws and things that we'll look into, some in the books to follow and much in the books previous. But we can confine them down to 10. We got a pretty good handle on what God expects of us as we live out our lives and as they would live out their lives as people. We have some introduction verses here in the first 5 verses of the 5th chapter of the 5th book of the Bible. And so we see as Moses gathering the people, these farewell addresses that he is giving. Moses summoned all Israel and said, "Hear, Israel, the decrees and laws I declare in your hearing today. Learn them, be sure to follow them. The Lord, our God, has made a covenant with us at Horeb. It wasn't with your ancestors the Lord made this covenant, but with us, with all of us who are alive here today. The Lord spoke to you face to face out of the fire on the mountain. At that time I stood between the Lord and you to declare to you the word of the Lord, because you were afraid of the fire and did not go up on the mountain." Some things to unpack there. First, the word hear. We've said in our previous study, the word hear, the command to hear, the imperative hear, is found over 80 times in the book of Deuteronomy. This thing you hear, get this. And hearing is not just kind of, well, one in one ear, out the other. Yeah, I heard you. It has this idea of it's penetrating, it's moving, it's affecting, influencing you. In the military, I give you this, let's say, HUA, hoo-ah. So can I hear a hoo-ah? And my understanding is HUA, hoo-ah, stands for heard, understood, acknowledged. That's what they're asking for. Heard, understood, acknowledged, and especially, we'll see, acknowledged through your behavior. Not just you understand it, but you're obeying what you are taught to share. Now, Moses recalls this event, and he says, this covenant was with you. As if these people were there, but this is the generation that's come along in the 40 years in the wilderness, so it was really their parents. But I think the point is, it wasn't just with your parents, it was with you too. You can't say, oh, that was for my mom and dad and my grandparents, that was old school tradition, kind of whatever. He said, no, God made this covenant for you. He's kept these promises, literally for hundreds of years, hasn't he? That he had made to those people. He reminds them who is making this challenge to them. And he said, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You know, this isn't just anybody talking to you. This isn't a stranger on the street. This is somebody who's cared for you, who watched over you. Without the Lord's help, you'd still be slaves in Egypt. It wouldn't be well with you. Life would be hard. You're about to go in and be a people with your own land. Remember where this came from. Who is speaking will sometimes determine how well we hear. And so this is somebody you need to hear. This is somebody that you need to listen to, who has delivered you as a nation, delivered you as a people. And I put a little note there that says deliverance leads to obedience. It should for them. God had delivered them. He had taken care of them. He had provided manna for them. Multiple times he had provided water for them, food for them, guidance for them. And not to pay him back, but it just the honor, being the recipient of that deliverance, was to obey him. Same thing for our salvation, isn't it? We have salvation. We're delivered from sin and the consequences of sin. We don't do our good works to pay God back, as if we ever could, but we do have an obligation. We should feel some kind of an obligation, a desire even, that our deliverance from sin leads to an obedient life, or a more obedient life, because we're all falling short of what God would have us to do. So we're going to review rather quickly the Ten Commandments, just a little thumbnail of each one of those. And I know for most of us, this is just kind of a reminder of these very basic things of what it means to be a person of faith, following the God of the Bible. So we start with this. They're breaking down into two natural categories. The first four commandments have to do with Israel's and our relationship with God. And it begins with a statement of priority. You shall have no other gods before me. I've heard this defended at times, saying, oh, there must be other gods because God says I have to be the best God, so there must be lesser gods. I think we can dismiss that. I think we see that in the grand message of the Bible, that the God is only one. The Hebrews were staunch and unique in their belief that there was only one God. And so have none before, but we do know we can take things and treat them as if they're God, give them priority as if they're God. So we've shared and looked at that. We all have these things in our life that we can put of greater importance than the Lord and His will for us. And so it's a matter of who's the number one priority in your life as a person of faith in God is that He is in His place of authority. Second is, last week we talked about all these kind of different shapes and idols not to make, whether the birds of the air, the land animals, or the creatures in the sea, or the stars and the moon, and things that we're tended to worship. And so we have this thing about idolatry, about making something physical and tangible when God is beyond all that. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven or above or on the earth, beneath it, or in the waters. Just kind of review of what we'd said before. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, God punishing the children of the sin of parents to the third and fourth generation to those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. Boy, there's some things to unpack as we share there. Again, we said last week, you don't make these images that you would, idols that you would say somehow contain your God, represent it, because God can't be contained or represented in any physical thing. And an interesting thing here, if you go to the Exodus text, at the same time Moses is up on the mountain getting the Ten Commandments from the Lord, what are the people doing down at the foot of the mountain? They're making a golden idol, the golden calf. They're making an idol. They're violating this very one. It also has in this passage this statement about the generations to come, that punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation. I want to give a thought on that. I don't think that God holds the guilt of our sin onto our children and our children's children. I'm responsible for the sin in my life, and so they're not responsible to God for my sins. So I don't think that is what the statement is saying, but I think there is just a very clear reality here that if parents do wrong, sometimes, sadly, tragically, those who carry the burden of that and pay some of the cost of that is the children or the grandchildren. And there are many troubled, disadvantaged kids that say, boy, they're just carrying so much baggage that their parents or their grandparents have handed down to them, and the hardships that they've had and the mistakes of the previous generation have fallen to them and made their life harder and burdened in such a way. So we see that take place. Sometimes somebody else has to help pay the earthly cost for our sin, or I pay the earthly cost for someone else's sin. So that takes place. So that's a reality, especially in families. But I also want you to note this, that when he says, there's 3 and 4 generations of difficulties that can come as a result of sin and its carryover and consequences. Don't miss this other. In verse 10, but showing love to 1,000 generations to those who love me and keep my commandments. The goodness, the blessings that you give far exceed the hardships and stuff that can carry on. Just a great reminder, God's blessings are always so great. We can focus our attention on the negatives, the hardships and the difficulties that happen, and sometimes the injustices that they feel with that. But boy, don't forget about the blessings. Don't forget about God's blessings that can flow to 1,000 generations that take place, not just 3 or 4 as is shared there. Ezekiel 18 verse 4 says, the one who sins is the one who dies. So I want to come back to saying we have that personal responsibility for our own sinful state before the Lord, but there is this reality that it carries over, and the idolatry that is mentioned there, is a pattern in the home that if you follow it as adults, then your children, maybe your children's children, are going to start following some of those patterns, because faith tends to be caught and as much as it is taught. And so there's the warnings that come with that. Third commandment, thou shalt not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. That is to be honored. Now in the Hebrew, there was the word Yahweh, which was the sacred, unique name for the God of Israel. It's based on I am in the burning bush story in Moses calling. And, he says, who will I say will send me when I'm going to deliver your people from slavery? And he says, down, I am who I am. And that is the Yahweh. They had such a sacredness, respect for this, that when they wrote it in Hebrew, the writers would intentionally kind of misspell it so it would be mispronounced, because you didn't even want to say that name. It was too honored. And the scribes would clean the tips of their pen before and after they wrote the name because of the respect that took place. Jesus taught us to pray on the Lord's Prayer, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, holy would be your name. And I don't know if we casually kind of use the word God, oh my God, or Lord, or something. That's misusing the name. Frankly, that's the name of Jesus that I can get much more offended at. I can tolerate a lot of 4-letter words more than I can when I hear the name of Jesus used as a curse in a disrespectful way. And so there's that personalness, because that's somebody I know and somebody I love. That's a personal name that takes place. I tend to tell this story when I talk about this particular commandment. It's not one of my prouder moments, but when I was in college and living in a boys' dorm and guys' dorm, and guys are crass and irritate each other and tease each other and try to get under each other's skin. And you get thick skin. You really have to in there. Like, you don't want to, if it bothers you, you don't want to show it that it bothers you. And somebody in our circle got this idea that we would start teasing other guys about their mother's name. You found out what their mother's first name was, and then you kind of joked and laughed and teased about it there. And, I always go on the record to say that I didn't start it. That wasn't my idea. I didn't start it, but I did participate. So that doesn't get me off the hook, but I put that disclaimer in there. Anyway, and we find that, some people who were tough and strong and nothing bothered them, but boy, you pick on mama and you're going to stir up some reaction in them when you talk about their mama or tease their mama's name about something. So that's kind of that earthly application of this spiritual principle that we should not do. Honor God's name before a watching world. Next, the fourth, observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy as the Lord your God has commanded you. And it really kind of goes back to the creation, first chapter of the Bible, where this pattern is set in place. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you or your son or daughter or male or female servant or your ox or your donkey or any of your animals or a foreigner residing in your town, so that your male and female servants may rest as you do. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. Boy, so much in there that we share. Like, you were slaves in Egypt. I'm pretty sure the Egyptians didn't give you the Sabbath off. They were trying to squeeze as much work out of their slave labor as they possibly could. So remember that. That's not the pattern that I want you to follow. We have that creation story that God created the universe in 6 days and rested on the seventh, not because he needed rest, but he knew the way he created us, we needed some time of rest and reflection and renewal for our bodies, our minds, and our souls. And I like the idea that it's not just you. It's your children. They got to rest too. It is your servants, the people who work for you, your employees. Give them the time off that they need. Even if your animals, don't work your animals in such a way. And even if you got a guest, a foreigner that's coming through, they have to honor it too. And this was kind of a unique thing for the Hebrews as opposed to all the other cultures around them, that they had this sacred day of rest, which in their customs would start on Friday night at sunset and end on Saturday night at sunset. Still with our Seventh-day Adventist friends and also Orthodox Jews will continue to practice that as the Sabbath. And most of us as Christians, we follow the Lord's Day. And we try to apply a lot of the same principles of things that we have on the Lord's Day. So a lot of us grew up, there's things, what do you not do on Sunday? Because, it's the Lord's Day and you refrain from those things or worldly amusements and such, or work in any way. I don't know ever in my life I have mowed the grass on a Sunday. That was just taught. You didn't do that. Didn't mow the grass on Sunday. We had a community pool that our family was members of growing up about a half mile down the road. And we didn't go on Sundays. Of course, I was the pastor's kid, so we were pretty busy on Sunday. Not like there was a lot of time. But don't go swimming on Sunday. And all kinds of other things that were part of that. And some of the cultural things, the blue laws and stores were closed and businesses were closed. We're kind of mirroring some of this. Now, I'm grateful for hospitals that are open on Sundays and fire stations that are open on Sundays, and the things that we need that are taken care of. I believe the principle really is about God's time. You don't burn the candle at both ends. You need that time of rest. Not just time of rest, but some of this is just the reflection upon God and His goodness and His grace. You need the rest physically, you need the rest mentally, but you need it spiritually as well, just to stop focusing on the demands and expectations and agendas to get through this life and this world. But what does God have for you? So honoring that and give God His time. We come to the second set of commandments, the last 6 commandments, and they all have to do with human relationships. And frankly, there's less commentary and they go a little faster as we walk through them. First is from the home. Honor your father and mother as the Lord your God has commanded you, so you may live long and that it may go well with you in the land the Lord your God is giving you. And it is noted in the New Testament that this is a commandment that comes with a promise. Paul quotes it in Ephesians chapter 6 as he's given responsibilities for wives to husbands, husbands to wives, and then children to their parents to obey their parents in the Lord, for this is right. And then he mentions and notes that. And it's a pretty good promise that we get there. It's going to go well with you there. And Paul adds, and you may enjoy long life on the earth. So, longevity and things usually. Father knows best, mother knows best, and respect and to honor them. There are exceptions to that general rule, but that is a good general rule that if you honor your parents, you're going to do things in a lot of ways that not only please them, but also please the Lord. The next 4 are stated with not any commentary. They're just put out there one right after the other. You shall not murder. Human beings are made in the image of God. To destroy a human being is to damage and to attack part of God's image. So don't do that. That is something that is considered very sacred. It's the worst of human crimes, isn't it? Murder. But Jesus teaches us that murder doesn't just happen when another physical life ends at the hands of someone else, a murderer. It really starts with the attitude of the heart. And I go to the Sermon on the Mount. You've heard it said from people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. That's the commandment, right? You shall not murder. There are consequences. Verse 22, but I tell you, anyone who is angry with his brother or sister will be subject to judgment. And again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court, and anyone who says you fool will be in danger of the fire of hell. So don't say, just because I didn't kill anybody, I'm okay with this one, I'm squeaky clean. No, if you started having the wrong attitudes, anger, you're building up toward them, it's bringing out bad words or thoughts or opinions and commentaries about people, you're in some dangerous territory there too that needs to be addressed. The next one, you shall not commit adultery, the seventh commandment there. You know, adultery in biblical times, in Deuteronomy, we'll look here to a passage some chapters ahead, is considered a capital crime. If a man is found sleeping with another man's wife, both the man who slept with her and the woman must die. That's capital punishment. Today, it's hardly considered a sin, much less a crime. And we would be unique as followers of the Lord to say, you know, we really believe that the sanctity of marriage and the sacredness of marital intimacy is to be honored, and it is best confined at intimacy into the covenant of marriage of husband and wife. And it's best for individuals, it's best for families, it's best for cultures, it's best for society if that would be practiced. The next, you shall not steal. Interesting. God's not only concerned with our relationship with other people, but how we treat other people's property. You know, it's not just you, how I treat you, but how I treat your property has something. So you have something that I want. And so there is the taking of items like tangible things that we could steal. But there's more than that. I think if you are being slandering of somebody's reputation, you are stealing their good name. And if you're doing that, that is a way of stealing too. In school, if you cheat, you put somebody else's answers in as your own work, let's say, you're stealing a grade that you didn't work for, you didn't earn, it's not really yours. So stealing has some levels and some nuances to it too. The eighth commandment, you will not give the ninth commandment, you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor, that there would be that trustfulness about your words and things. I give you the word Jesus says later in the Sermon on the Mount about all you need to say is yes and no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. You got such a good reputation that if you say it, that's the way it is. And there's not going to be much second guessing in things. We live in a time, there's so much mistrust. Something said, and we're not going to believe it. That's the default now. I'm not going to believe what the government says. I'm not going to believe what the news says. I'm not going to believe what the medical community says. I'm not going to believe what businesses say. I'm not going to believe what religions say, or the church says, or pastors say. And our challenge, and we're up to this, our challenge as Christians, as churches, as ministers, as people of faith is to let our word be full of integrity. So that we're not saying one thing when it's not true. And we have a solid reputation, and that will be well with us. We're known for speaking the truth. We'll seek to work on that. And when we're wrong, we're honest about that. And we'll say it. I made a mistake. I messed up. I'm sorry. We're not above of showing the vulnerabilities and the mistakes that we can make. And then last, the 10th commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not set your desire on your neighbor's house or land, his male or female servant, his oxen, his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Just again, it's an attitude, it's a desire of something. And my understanding of the wording in this text is that not so much that if your neighbor has a nice car and you say, man, I wish I had a car like that. that's not so much the essence of what that command is about. It's not saying I want something like that other person has. It's saying I want their car. I want to have it so they don't have it. It's kind of I wish it were mine. And so that's when you get into things like the servants and your house and land. I want that particular thing. So there's a degree there, there's good ambition to try to strive to add to your life and maybe gain some things that you see other people have that are attractive to you, but to say, I wish it cause them to damage somebody else by that they wouldn't have it, a searching of the attitude. So not wanting something like another has as much as wanting the very thing in your outline, write that down, very thing that someone else has. And really covenantness can lead then to some of the other commandments, breaking them that take place because, I want what they have, so I'm going to steal it. Well, don't steal, or I'm going to lie to get something. So that may take, or, your desire is for something else. So be alert to that. Moses is reminding this new generation of these 10 rules that they are to abide by, not to be forgotten, but to hear, as we said at the beginning, and to remember them, to hear, understand, and to apply them to our lives. Because God is a holy God, and He has the authority to give these expectations. He closes here with this verse in verse 22. These are the commandments the Lord proclaimed with a loud voice to your whole assembly there at the mountain. From out of the fire, the cloud of deep darkness, He added nothing more. Then He wrote them down on 2 tablets and gave them to me. This was coming from God Himself. And I put as your last blank there, no religion has been greater than its idea of God. And we are fortunate, I think. See, our faith tells us about a God who is mighty and powerful, but He's also loving and compassionate as He shares. And He is holy and complete. So if you have a lesser God, you think of a God who is evil or corrupt or has less than full integrity for us, and your religion's going to be shady and difficult and sad and unfulfilling. But we have a high and holy God that He wants to remind us of, and so He gives these commandments, and so we have an understanding, even a motivation to seek to apply them, to hear, understand, and apply, acknowledge and apply them into our lives. Now, before we finish, I've got this little thing that I do on the 10 Commandments with your hands. So a real quick way to help everybody remember. Say, I can't remember the 10 Commandments. I'm going to tell you how you can remember them in order through your hands here, counting 1 to 10. 1 is you have no other gods before me. God is number 1. He's the priority. Okay. 2, you use your hands and think like scissors, like you're making some handiwork. You don't make any idols. You do not create for yourself any idols. 3, think 3 fingers, and they kind of make the shape of a letter W. Reminds you of word, a word, and the word that we respect is the name of God. And so we honor the word, the name of the Lord. On the 4, put 4 fingers down and rest your thumb there. Your thumb is resting. It's observing the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath day and let your thumb get its rest. Moving to 5, put your hand up right here like you're making a pledge or saying an oath. You are showing honor. And so honor your father and your mother. When we come to 6, just like a little gun, bang, dead. Don't kill. Don't murder. That's a good one. 7, put 2 fingers together and separate them apart. And that's just like husband and wife, and adultery is this separation of that covenant that is shared together. And so don't let that separation take place. The 8th commandment, put 4 fingers in each hand together, put them in front of your face. It's like those are bars in a jail. You're in jail. Who goes to jail? People who steal, robbers, they go to jail. So that's the 8th commandment. 9th commandment, put 9 fingers up, and you're hiding your thumb. See? It's kind of false testimony. Like, I'm not showing you everything there. So that is, you're not lying. It's just you're hiding that back there. And finally, number 10 is kind of like having the gimmies, where you take your hands, see if you can get it where you can see it better. You take your hands and you just gimme, gimme, gimme. That's covenant. There's something that I want and caught up in that. So practice those, remember those, teach them to your children, your grandchildren, maybe 1,000 generations from now. That can be a lesson that is well applied in all of your family. Thank you for joining with us. Next week, we're going to look at chapter 6, and I look forward to sharing that time together. God bless you. Have a great week.